Hi, Jeremy Cordeaux in the Court of Public Opinion. I'm just on air here to let you know that we'll be live streaming the Court of Public Opinion every Friday between 9 o'clock and 12 on jeremycordeaux.com. Please join us. We'd love to have you.
Welcome to Hong Kong Confidential. I'm Jules Hannaford and I'm your host. I'm an Australian woman and I've been living in Hong Kong for many years. I'm a mother, a teacher, an author, and I want to share my wisdom and the wisdom of others with you. Thanks for joining me and I hope you enjoy the show. I'd just like to take a moment to tell you about a book that I've written. It's a memoir called Fool Me Twice, and it's a story about my life with a focus on my journey internet dating, where I was scammed and injured in the process. It's an educational book that will help many other people not to get caught in the same trap that I was. I'd like to also take this opportunity to play my book promo for you. Here it is.
From life on a farm in rural Australia, where wide open spaces made a young woman yearn to know what was beyond her country town. She moved to the city, became a mother, and found her dream career which took her across the world. But still, something's missing. In her search for love, she traveled far, trusted deeply. She wanted so badly to find someone that she almost lost herself in the process and learned some hard lessons along the way. Fool Me Twice, a new memoir by Jules Hannaford. Available August 20th on Amazon.
Today I'm here with Mel Patching. Hi Mel, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi Jules, I'm really excited to be here.
It's so cool. Mel, where are you from and what was your childhood like?
Well, it's a hard question to answer. I was born and brought up in Zambia. That's the short story. My parents are British Indian. I guess my passport's British. I guess that's the kind of country that I officially part of.
Are you a bit of a third culture kid?
Yeah.
Don't really belong anywhere, but belong everywhere.
Exactly.
Awesome. And what was your childhood like growing up in Zambia?
It was really fun. Like I have a very loving family, very loving parents. They're very accepting of me. They're not like Asian parents at all. The kind of parents who just want to, give everything to you. So I was very lucky to have that. And, the big wide wilderness of Zambia was a lot of fun. And of course, secondary school things got tougher. Like I lost a lot of my confidence then, as I think most people do. And then it was moving to England for education. But I think childhood in the beginning, it was really happy. And then it got really tough after that.
What were some of the things that were the initial triggers for you losing your confidence when you got to high school, do you think? Because that's so interesting that you say that because my confidence just grew in high school.
Really?
Yeah, I absolutely loved school, never wanted to miss out on it. But I was really, really talented at sport. And I think that really helped me build my profile and, be popular or whatever it was that I needed. And I just had no real interest in the way I looked because I guess I was quite a tomboy sort of girl. So anyway, back to you. This is not about me.
No, it's great to hear a different experience. Yeah, I like it.
I was very secure. It was ridiculous. My insecurities came later. But anyway, so what were the triggers for your sort of beginnings of your insecurities?
I think it was just the kind of normal progression of where, like primary school, I feel like I'm the center of the world, as you do as you're a kid. I was super confident. I had tons of friends. I would always be the one who's bossing everyone about and deciding what game to play and everything. I was sorted. Secondary school, it was the first time I experienced rejection, and not fitting in and not being part of the popular girls and not being the cool crowd. And it just totally shook me. And I'm okay, I must be doing something wrong. And I think from then it changed my way of living and my way of seeing myself, where I was it's more important to be like someone in order to fit in than it is to be myself. So it's taken a while to unlearn that, but thankfully I have now.
It's so interesting because that's how many young people feel in this day and age, particularly young girls. And it seems to me as a teacher that I can see that social media has meant that children compare themselves to each other even more. I don't know how old you are. Was social media around in those days?
No.
Okay. You look so young.
I'm 32.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Are you? Okay, folks, I thought she was about 22.
I don't know if I should take that as a compliment or not.
I don't know either. Sorry. When you're 50, you would take it as a compliment.
Okay.
But yeah, you look super young. Why do you think that you felt rejected and you didn't fit in? Was it because you didn't fit into a certain type of group, or were you too nerdy, or were you too studious, or not bright enough, or what was it, do you think?
I think it was less about me and more about like just being in a bigger crowd, because primary school was very small. My classes were like, I don't know, 10 people. And then secondary school was like 30 people per class. So of course you're not going to fit in with everyone. I was in a boarding school.
Oh, me too.
So, okay, great.
I loved it.
I hate that you loved that.
But I got sent at 15. So I was going into year 11 when I went. So I wasn't there for the early years of high school.
No, I was boarding school since I was 6 years old.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
Is that because your family were in Zambia?
There weren't very many good schools.
So there wasn't really an option.
Yeah, there was no option really.
How was that going off to boarding school at 6?
Traumatic, totally traumatic. For me and my parents. I cannot even imagine. Yeah.
What effect did that have you on a child? Because as a little one, because you said you really enjoyed primary school.
I did, because it had huge impact on my life. And I think a lot of my adult life has been healing the stuff I went through in boarding school. Like it would be a whole book to write.
You should write a book. I know someone that can help you with that.
I mean, just like a few things, I guess, would be like primary school is fine because I'm young, right? So you adapt so fast. The first few weeks, I would cry because I was missing my parents. But then I would have all these new things to explore and I'd go off and explore them and I would just adapt. But secondary school, I still found it like a wrench, like it was like a painful wrenching of my heart every time I had to leave home. And it would kind of mean that I was never living in the present, because I was at home. I was always dreading going back to school. At school, I was always waiting to go home, you know? So it didn't help that the school was not very nice, as in like it wasn't very comfortable or like, you know, it's just like a basic mission school in Zambia. I mean, there's nothing too fancy about it.
Oh, so you weren't even in boarding school in the UK. You were in Zambia.
Oh, yeah. Just like home comforts, you know, like no good food, no nothing, you know. And also like in boarding school, you have one teacher to a ton of kids. So I'm going through my prime development years with no like consistent caregiver, like no one who was assigned to me, significant to me, like asking how I am, and no one to ask questions to how to go through stuff. And, you know, so like secondary school, losing confidence, it was like these teenage girls were packed into one room with absolutely no privacy.
Yeah.
So like just emotions exploding everywhere. People say whatever they want. And then of course it's just like, this is the first time someone shouted at me. It's the first time someone's rejected me. So like it was all this, and I put it all on myself. I was not like, it's because they're mean. No, it was like, it's because I'm doing something wrong.
Oh, so that's so interesting, because that now makes sense. The fact that you were in boarding school adds a whole new layer to the depth of the impact that all of these negative experiences would have had on you, because you wouldn't have had your family to go home to debrief with, or to go to that safe space where a lot of kids can do if they're bullied at school or they have a bad day. They get to go home. Some kids in the world, many kids don't have that, sadly. So what do you think the key impacts were on your personality initially to be away from your family when you were little?
Well, it kind of made me like this. The way I survived life was to live on my own, was to be alone. So, because that was the only constant that I had, was myself. So it kind of led to, I guess, whenever I came up with difficult situations or anything that scared me or anything negative, the place I would run to is inside. I would withdraw from everyone, and I had no communication skills. Like I didn't know how to talk to people about what I was going through. And it also became a whole like game of, I would withdraw from my parents to see how much effort they would put in to kind of reach out to me. And then I would be like, okay, if they really prove that they love me, then I'll open up. So like that, like was a whole way of relating to people that I kind of created as a survival strategy that obviously has not served me well in my life.
Did your parents recognize you were struggling, and then did they try to delve into it with you or make it up to you or compensate for it?
I mean, totally. Like my mom, I still remember reading letters from her, like asking me to open up and asking me to tell her what's going on, because I just shut myself in my bedroom for hours when I was at home. But also, like, she would always go out of her way to like give me all my favorite things the first day I was home from school. She was really loving like that. And it was almost, I became in a weird way, really dependent on them as well as withdrawn, because so I was very clingy. I was very, very clingy as a kid, even into my teenage years.
Right.
Because it was like, I don't have a kind of love that I can just take for granted because I know it's going to leave in a month. And I'm going to have to go back to school for 3 months.
And did that create any abandonment issues with you?
Huge abandonment issues.
Yeah.
Of course.
And how does that impact you in your relationships as an adult?
Always like I have this anxiety, and now I've learned to recognize it and and love it. I can actually have proper relationships. Whereas before it was such a terrifying thing to be friends with people, because if I got on with someone, friends with them, I would want them all to myself, and I couldn't let them be friends with anyone else. Because then, oh my God, it's like a poverty lack mentality of like, I really craved attention and love. And I would get super jealous if anyone got more than I did. So it was like all of that kind of stuff.
That's so interesting.
Going on.
Yeah, I get it. And then how did then those sort of feelings then manifest into the troubles you had as a teenager? Like, for example, I know that you suffered from an eating disorder. Tell me a bit about how that came about and what happened.
Yeah. So that actually happened when I was in England, and it's actually started the last year of university. I think it was a combination of factors that led to me dieting. That was the trigger to binge eating. So I was never very happy with the way I looked. I thought I was really ugly. I've never been kind of thin. So I always thought I was overweight and never attractive. Like people would compliment me on being nice or whatever, but they'd never compliment me on my looks and stuff. So yeah, I really had a very low self-esteem all the way through secondary school and university. And so I was like, right, I'm going to diet and I'm going to be beautiful and I'm going to be accepted and loved. So I went on this crazy diet, which was only 30 days. Surprising how 30 days can impact the rest of your life. But it was a very stringent diet and exercise routine. And I lost I think it was 12 kg in 30 days.
That's huge.
It was crazy.
Yeah, dangerous.
And I felt amazing because I was just like a whole other person, a whole other body. Like I loved the clothes I could wear. I was just, confidence just shot right up. But little did I know something had happened in my brain. And I started, and obviously my body, it was so unhealthy to do that. My body reacted by wanting to eat more. So after the diet, I was like, yeah, I'm going to eat everything I want because, I finished the diet. I'm going to treat myself. And food has always been a big part of my family culture. We celebrate with food. We reward each other with food. We give gifts. It's always a cake or something. So yeah, I rewarded myself for losing weight by eating cake. This is how naive I was. And then it became a pattern and it became something I couldn't control. And for about 2 years after university, I was binge eating every day. What it would look like was in the mornings, I was usually fine. And then I was at work. It was my first job after university, and lunchtime, I'd have a normal lunch just like everyone else. But then I would need something sweet after lunch because that's normal. So I'd go out and I'd have chocolate, but I want more. So I'd go and buy more. And then the next day I knew that 2 bars of chocolate were not enough. So I should buy 3 today. And then it kept building up. And then I would have urges to eat more all during the afternoon. And I couldn't wait to finish work just so I could eat. So then as soon as I was off work, I would run to the supermarket, buy all my favorite stuff, run home, hide in my room, eat all my stuff, watch TV, fall asleep in a food coma. And this would repeat itself. And then the weekends, because I didn't have work to distract me, I usually wake up really late. After you eat a lot, you don't wake up early. And so I would wake up maybe, 12 or 1 and I'd be starving. And then I'm like, okay, I'm not going to eat. I'm going to do something else. Never worked. I would run to the supermarket, buy my lunch or a restaurant or whatever. And then I would buy tons of snacks. And then I'd go home, eat, watch TV, fall asleep.
So you were just repeating this pattern, but you weren't purging, so you weren't bulimic.
No, I wasn't bulimic because I would try to throw up, but it was too scary and too uncomfortable for me. And eating was the most pleasurable things. It totally became out of control and I didn't know what was happening. Like my brain would find ways to be alone and eat. So I would hide in places, even in the office, I would hide in places and eat. I would, like at home, like I was actually for the first few months, I was living with housemates after uni. I would go into their cupboards and like steal all their food if I had eaten all my food.
Oh, wow. Did they know you were doing that?
No one said anything to me. I don't know if they did or not. And I was too ashamed to like say anything, obviously. And like sometimes I would, so if a friend was like away for the weekend, I would eat all her food and make a note of what it was and buy her like the new stuff and then eat it to the level that it was. So like,
wow, so that's very, very prescriptive and very, very regimented. It was
my brain, I found really clever ways of eating and I got really good at it.
Wow. Yeah. And did you suffer from any shame or guilt after the eating?
Yes. So huge amounts of guilt. And I would promise myself I would never do it again. And like the thing with binge eating, it's just like I didn't know what was happening. I just thought that I needed food and I didn't understand why I needed so much. And I was like, okay, I've given you loads, body. Why aren't you happy? No, it still wanted more. It still wanted more. And it wouldn't, like this urge to eat would just completely control me. And it was so scary because I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know how to make it stop. I could see all the negative impact it was having in my life. I couldn't have a social life because, you know, first of all, I'm ashamed about how much weight I'm gaining. And also, I can't really trust myself to make an appointment with someone because I'm like, what if I'm in the middle of an urge and I need to go binge? And how can I like hang out with my friends? I just can't trust myself with anything. And because I made so many promises to myself every day for about 2 years that I would not binge again the next day, like I would binge and I'll say, I promise this is the last time. Then the next day I would do it again. And that just eroded the trust that I had in myself. So from then on, I didn't trust myself to keep any of my promises, whether it was related to binge eating or not. And it just like robbed me of any kind of self-esteem and just created this like loathing. I was just overwhelmed with loathing for myself. So I would kind of, I would be eating and part of me would be like, this is so disgusting. While the other part of me is like, this is exactly what I need. It's so yummy. And this the pleasure of sugar, like it's so good, right? So I had that double mindset the whole time. And like part of me was just looking at myself and saying, you are the most disgusting pig that I've ever come across. And I hate you. And it was just so I would convince myself not to eat. I would say, okay, well, look, you don't have money and you're spending all your money on food. Look what it's doing to your waistline. Look what it's doing to your social life. I mean, what's your future going to be? You're going to die like the size of a house in a bed because you can't get up. And people are going to come and find your dead body surrounded by chocolate wrappers. And then they're going to be disgusted too.
You logically could think of all this in your brain, but you still weren't able to stop.
I still couldn't stop. And that was like so terrifying.
I can imagine. Terrifying. And then did that then lead on to depression, anxiety, self-harm, anything like that?
Well, depression, of course, was highly linked with that. I mean, depression had been something I was familiar with because of my loneliness as a kid.
So is that something you feel you had in high school?
Yeah, definitely.
Right. Okay. Was that ever recognized and treated?
Not until I was dealing with my binge eating disorder. So yeah, it's hugely depressed and it was such a negative spiral. I mean, you just go lower and lower and lower and you can't believe you can get lower and then you do. And then it's like even scarier.
The binge eating itself is a form of self-harm, isn't it?
It totally is. But it's also like, I mean, I had suicidal thoughts in the sense that I wished life would be over because it would be easier to be dead than to be living with this terrible condition. But like I was too afraid to actually throw up. I was too afraid to actually harm myself. So, but what I kind of fantasize about how people would love me more if I was dead. Like I would be, how people glorify once people pass away, especially if they die young. They get glorified. They get all that love and attention. I'm like, well, maybe dying is the way to get love and attention. Like maybe those kind of thoughts occurred to me, and I would fantasize, but I would never
have a plan.
Anything.
Yeah.
No. It just scared me too much.
You obviously recognized it was a problem. Did you tell anybody or did anybody notice what was going on, or were you completely alone in all of this?
I was very alone. I didn't actually know what was going on for most of the time. I just had this habit and I just had this thing and I didn't know what was happening. And a lot of the time, because you're in a food coma, you can't actually stop and think and figure out that there's a way out. But it took about 1.5 years before I actually admitted that I had a problem. It was on a day where I was actually really happy. I spent it with my family in England and I was really happy. It was a great day. So I came home at night and I still binged. And I'm like, why am I binging? Okay, it must be a problem. So then I didn't have anyone to reach out to because I was living alone. I was living with a host family. You're not going to go up to your friend's parents and say, hi, can you help me with this life-destroying problem? So I actually reached out to my cousin who's a nutritionist. And I said, I am eating too much and I can't stop. What do I do? She was like, okay, like don't panic. This is probably a disorder. Could be bulimia or something like that. What you need to do is get a therapist. Unfortunately, I was on a kind of a, beginner salary. I had no money. My parents didn't have money. I didn't want to ask them either. And I couldn't afford therapy. The only person I really confided in was my sister. We had been dieting together. I don't think she had the problem that I did. I think she's experienced a bit of anorexia and stuff before. So she was like really understanding. And she was like, yeah, therapy is the way to go. But I couldn't afford it.
Isn't it such a shame that people can't access therapy for mental health issues like they can physical health issues, and it's so expensive?
Yeah. And that was acknowledging it was a problem and was actually kind of like dooming in a way, because I was doomed, because I felt, oh my God, this is going to affect the rest of my life. I'm going to have to manage this for the rest of my life. How am I going to get out of it? I don't want to be this person. It was such a horrible feeling, but it actually motivated me to be like, okay, I need to deal with it and get off my ass and actually do something. So I got online and just went crazy. Like every night while I was binge eating, I was
searching
how to stop. And then I found this book and cost me £10 for Kindle or something like that. And it was written by Catherine Hansen. It's called Brain Over Binge. And it was basically her story on how she had got over bulimia without therapy. So I was like, okay, let's do this. I think I read the whole thing in a night. And it was amazing to actually read someone else's story and to recognize myself in it. And finally, I'm not alone in this. I'm not some crazy weirdo. Like other people have this problem too. And she was binging and stealing food just like I was. And it was such a relief to read that. And she actually, in her book, she explains she was bulimic for 6 years and she was going through therapy through all of them and didn't work. And she actually found a cure for herself by reading a different book called Rational Recovery, which is what...
I know it. I've read it.
There you go.
Yeah. Yeah.
What Alcoholics Anonymous use.
Yeah.
So,
well, no, they don't, do they?
Do they not?
No, I don't think so. I think they use the 12 steps.
Yes.
And rational recovery is it's called smart recovery now, I think. And it's a different program where you've got your beast one on your shoulder and then your normal voice, and you've got to fight that beast.
Right.
That's what I remember. I read it because I had a friend who was an alcoholic and I was trying to help her.
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah. So it's a very good. Yeah, it's a really good book, isn't it?
Yeah. And like for the first time, like I realized, okay, well, she was telling her story and she was like, well, with therapy, they think that binge eating or bulimia or anorexia is a secondary problem. So it's got hidden cause. You're binging because you're depressed, or you're binging because, you've got like, I don't know, work issues, or you're stressed.
Or anxiety.
Right. Because of the fact that I had been, even on my happy days, I was binging. Like I knew that wasn't the reason, right? It's not like you can have your life perfectly, everything's working well, but you still binge, right? So by reading that book, she stopped binging just by reading a book and has never binged for the rest of her life. And by reading her book, that's what happened to me. So
what? Just from reading her book, you were able to stop?
I was able to stop. I never binged again.
Oh,
it's crazy.
What?
It's crazy. And that's how important books are. Books are life-changing. And that's why I wanted to be on this broadcast today. Because if there's anyone out there who's got an eating disorder and they can't afford therapy, read a book.
Yeah, that's terrific advice, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's great advice.
And it's surprising how effective it was, because basically you have to just understand it a different way. All that happened, all it is a habit. And once you understand how your brain works, then you understand how to change it. So basically, when I was dieting, I went into that survival mode. My animal brain kicked in and it was like, I'm going to override all rational thinking. I'm going to override your prefrontal cortex and make you eat because you are going to die if you don't eat. So that's where the first urge came from. And then as a habit forms, it's like, you know, you have your trigger and then you do the action and you have your reward. So my trigger was the urge. My action was eating. My reward was the sugar high, right? So it formed a habit and then it formed a pathway in my brain. So every time that trigger came, and the reward actually almost leads to the trigger again, right? So it's just an endless loop that goes on in your brain. It really helped because it wasn't labeling binge eating or bulimia as a disease that you can't control. The control was put back in your hands.
That's the premise of rational recovery.
Yes.
That you are in control and it's not a disease.
Exactly.
That's why I don't use it. Because I
see.
believe, I'm not an expert, folks, but I believe I don't use it because they see it as a disease and you've got to have your higher power and work through the 12 steps. Rational recovery, which is now known as smart recovery, I do believe, again, I'm pretty sure, that works on the premise that you are in control and you have a choice.
Yeah.
And once you know you have a choice, you can make that choice. And I think it's really interesting what you said about the sugar addiction, because if you look back now, do you think it really was about addiction? Like an alcoholic might be addicted or a drug addict might be addicted. Was your binge eating basically an addiction to sugar?
100%. 100%.
Well, there you go. Isn't that interesting?
But it was more than that because habit and addiction are pretty interchangeable, I guess. I mean, was my body physically addicted to sugar? Yes, I would obviously have cravings when I didn't have sugar. But when I stopped binging, I didn't have withdrawal symptoms.
Right.
I guess because it's food. It's not like, you know, I'm still eating. I'm still having a normal amount of sugar in my diet. So it's not like I'm completely sugar free.
Yes, you're not going cold turkey on
it's not
sugar.
The same as alcohol.
No, it's not the same, is it? Yeah, that's an interesting way of looking at it. What was it like the first couple of days after reading that book? How did you do that?
It was kind of like scary because I was like, is this really going to work? What if it doesn't work? It has to work. It has to work. But basically, the only way to break a pattern is to stop the cycle. So because I had this false belief that I had to listen, I had to obey this urge. Whenever it came up, I had an urge to eat. I had to obey it. Like there was no other choice. And after reading this book, I realized I did have a choice, but I could break the cycle by disobeying my urge. And then that stops the action and the trigger and then the reward. And then another trigger would come up. I would not eat. And then, so no action, no reward. So eventually my brain was like, okay, well, this habit is useless now. She doesn't need it anymore. And the pathway is just eroded. A new pathway forms.
Did you have to replace it with something else like exercise or movies or?
I thought I would. And it was weird. In the first few days after reading the book, I would feel an urge coming up and then all the anxiety came because I knew it was coming. I knew I would fall into a binge cycle. And then it was like also anxiety. Could I disobey it? I don't know if I'm strong enough to disobey it, you know? So a few days I would give in and a few days, you know, it was like experimenting with myself to see the power of my own choice, you know, because I had just no trust in myself anymore. So as soon as I'd have this urge, I would distract myself. If I was alone and I had an urge, I went for tea. Tea is very comforting. So I'd have a cup of tea or I would watch TV or I would go for a walk if it was really, really taking over my brain. But usually, like if I was reading a book or something, urge would come up and I'd just carry on reading and I would distract myself. And it was as simple as that, you know. So after about a month of not obeying my urges, the urges stopped coming.
Wow, that quickly?
They disappeared after only a month.
And have they never returned since?
Never returned.
That's so cool.
Because it's a brain pathway, right? So once it's changed, it doesn't happen again. After that, I promised myself to never starve myself again, never diet again.
And I think that's an important message for our listeners to recognize the danger in dieting.
Yeah, it's so dangerous.
Yeah, you just need to eat healthily. 3 meals a day, all 5 food groups. Women need to have saturated fats in their diet for their reproductive systems and their hormones.
Yeah.
And if you couple a healthy diet with exercise, you should be at your optimum weight.
Yeah.
What do you think about body dysmorphia and the fact that you might have been looking at yourself and not actually seeing how you actually truly were?
Oh, yeah, that was definitely there too. Like I saw myself as much bigger than I actually was. Back then, I was at least 3 sizes bigger than I am now. But I wasn't like, I don't know, grossly obese or anything like that. But I saw myself as that, definitely.
What comes first, the dysmorphia or the eating disorder? Or I guess it varies for individuals for sure.
That's a good question. They probably go hand in hand because I wouldn't have dieted if I thought I was okay. But I think what has driven most of my actions in my life is the need to be accepted and loved. And that so often I kind of get it wrong. I think people will accept me if I'm pretty or thin. And then I become pretty and thin. And
nothing changes. Yeah.
So, I mean, you definitely get more compliments and it's really nice, but I've never been as thin as I was on that diet. I never need to. But yeah, that acceptance now I know comes from accepting myself first. Before other people can even have a proper relationship with me, I need to.
Yeah, that's what they say, that you've got to love yourself first before somebody else can fall in love with you.
100%.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So with binge eating, after that, I promised myself to never diet again, and I haven't. I've never restricted the amount of food I eat. You know how we have like upper limits and lower limits? So my lower limit is very strong now, so I won't let myself starve. And my upper limit has also strengthened after I've recovered from binge eating. And sometimes I do. I eat a little bit too much. I feel overfull. I feel a bit yucky, but it's never as bad as when I was actually binge eating and it was never out of control. So I can stop whenever I want to.
I certainly know that feeling of overeating and that uncomfortableness, and you can't really sleep and you feel awful. And was that how you felt all the time?
Yeah, that was like.
And was it almost painful?
Yeah, it was horrible for my body too, my poor stomach.
What would a binge eat look like? Like, what would you eat in a couple of hours?
I would go through a whole box of cereal, dry, sometimes with like milk or yogurt or cream. I would eat like a packet of biscuits, maybe like 2 big bars of chocolate and muffins, cakes. I love anything with icing. So yeah, like if it was in those days when I was binge eating fully in one go, I would probably have at least half a box of cereal, 2 bars of chocolate, probably like 4 muffins and maybe a bag of crisps as well.
And this is all on top of your regular meals.
Oh, yeah, totally. It was like going to the supermarket. I was always like, well, maybe this won't satisfy my binge, so I better buy more. Or like in a cafe, instead of buying a slice of cake in a cafe, I would buy the whole cake.
Wow, would you? That's so interesting. I've never bought a whole cake.
I have eaten a whole cake to myself.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then, but you never...
Not in one sitting. I don't think, because my stomach would explode, but easily in 2 days. Yeah.
So that must have been fairly scary and isolating to be doing all of that. And then when you realized that it wasn't normal behavior.
Yeah, hugely.
One thing I wanted to ask you was, in my research and just reading over the years, I've really read a lot about eating disorders being linked to control.
Yeah.
And I wonder whether, did you feel out of control, or is that, here's me playing armchair psychologist. I'm not a psychologist. I'm just making all this up. But is it linked to that sort of lack of control with your life as a child and being in boarding school and not having that love and being able to sort of have control over your life? Do you think it's linked to that?
Hugely.
Oh,
hugely.
see?
Oh, yeah. Actually, there was a trigger to the dieting. And that wasn't only self-loathing. It was, I broke my elbow, and it was the most unexpected accident. And it was like a big shock to the system about how I was not in control of my life and how these terrible things could happen to me. So I took control by dieting.
Oh, right.
So now I have a sense of, I know that I'm a controlling person. Like I have these tendencies, and now I recognize them. I can actually kind of temper it down a little bit. And
so do you catch yourself?
I catch myself.
Catch yourself and change the way that you think, or change the way that you behave, or both.
Yeah. And sometimes I don't catch myself every time, but I recognize what's going on inside of me. So if I see the control monster coming up, then I'm like, okay, or if she explodes and she like tries to control a situation, I understand what's happening and I'm okay with it. I'm not going to beat myself up for it. I know where it's come from,
And have you had any therapy since all of this over the years?
Not about eating, no. I mean, food is a very emotional thing, I think, for all of us. And it does directly impact your emotions. It makes you happier when you eat. I don't see anything wrong with having something sweet to like brighten up my day or to give me more energy or whatever it is. I'm just very aware of why I'm doing it. And I know, okay, if I feel really crap, and I just want a piece of cheesecake, I am going to have that. That is not a problem. I am not going to deny myself that. And it's a very delicate balance to strike. But luckily, because I've been through this experience, again, I know my upper limit and my lower limit. So when my control starts to take over and I want to control what I eat, I have that lower limit. So when I get hungry, I'm like, no, I'm not going to control this anymore. I'm going to eat and be human and be normal. You know, when I have these urges or emotions wanting me to eat more, when it comes to a certain point, I can stop.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So you've developed that recognition tool and then the willpower.
Yeah. Awareness is such an important thing. I mean, willpower, I've never had much willpower, as you can tell. And it's not about willpower. It's about self-love. I would never do that to myself again.
Oh, that's a really lovely way to put it. Yeah, that makes so much sense. Have you had a conversation with your mum and dad about all of this afterwards? Do they know what you went through? They will after this podcast. Unless you hide it to them, hide it from them.
No, I have. I think I've spoken about it. I told them that I had an eating disorder, but I have never really gone into it in this much detail. And I think it's because it's hard for them to be away from me and away from their kids for so long. When I was in England, they were still living in Zambia. So I think it would really hurt them to know that I was suffering that much.
Yeah, I think for any parent, if their child is suffering and they weren't there to support or they didn't know about it, they would feel disappointed that they weren't sort of there to help. And
also, like, they could have helped.
Yeah, you didn't ask. That's what I was going to say. Do you, in hindsight, wish you'd reached out to them for help?
Again, no, because there's nothing they could do.
But they could have paid for you to go to therapy.
They don't have money.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I made an assumption there. No. Okay.
No, they're like missionaries out in Zambia. They're not even on any kind of income.
Oh, right. Sorry, I didn't realize that.
No.
So I'm making an assumption that
it's totally fine.
Yeah, sorry about that. I feel terrible. I would like to cut that, but I'm going to leave it in to
Don't
just
feel
show
terrible.
how. No, wait. I'm going to leave it in to show how we do make assumptions. Like I had some assumption that they were diplomats or something like that.
Right.
Not missionaries.
No.
So how does that religious factor fit into all of this?
Well, that is, again, another book.
Yeah, you should write a book. Oh, my gosh. You got so much to tell.
Well, I mean, yeah, so it was kind of a hard time, actually, because, I was brought up a Christian, but in university, I decided I'm not a Christian anymore. It's like, university, you kind of get to know yourself more and you kind of get to know more about the world and you start to choose how you live your life. So I decided to be not a Christian anymore. And it made it a little bit awkward with my parents because, that's what they want from me. That's what they know the best way to live life. And of course, they want to gift that to me. And I love them for it. It's just that I choose to live differently. So yeah, there was a bit of separation during university. And that's probably why I couldn't really reach out to them. First of all, they don't have money to pay for therapy. Second of all, they would feel really bad because they're so far away. They can't actually come and give me a hug. And thirdly, we weren't as close as we were because I was not,
practicing Christian.
Well, yeah. And it wasn't like they chose to withdraw from me because I'm not a Christian. It was me who withdrew from them.
Sure.
Yeah.
And did that have any impact on your self-esteem or the way you felt about yourself as a child? Or was it all pretty normal because you'd grown up with it?
Yeah, it was everything I knew. Everyone I knew was a Christian. So it's kind of normal. Yeah.
And then in hindsight, would have been any different if you hadn't been raised in that sort of Christian environment in an African country?
Who knows what would have happened if I had.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think I chose to not be a Christian because it was probably a control thing. I wanted control over my life. I didn't want to give it up to some deity who didn't really give me nice things anyway. So
yeah. You've been busy watching you binge for 2 years.
Yeah.
You've turned your life around, obviously, and feel so much better about yourself. What do you think are the key tricks that you've used to do that?
Wow. Self-love is the biggest thing I've learned.
How do we find that if we don't have it?
So I was very depressed, obviously, when I was coming out of binge eating. And then I read something, The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. And that was the first time in my life when I was reading that book and I was understanding how to disidentify from my thoughts and become truly present in myself, find that inner peace. I was reading it and I had this second of inner peace. It was like a moment. And it was the first time I'd experienced it my entire life. It was only a moment. My thoughts started straight away. Negative thoughts came straight back. But I was so overjoyed because I saw that I could actually be that happy. That was actually possible to be that peaceful and that happy. So I really delved into all of Eckhart's teachings and really kind of trained myself to become more present and aware of what's going on in my head And without that ability to disidentify from my thoughts, I wouldn't have been able to change anything about my life.
So what do you mean disidentify with your thoughts? What's that mean?
Have you read the book?
No.
Okay, you have to. Oh
I
my God.
will. I'll check it out.
It's similar to what we were talking about in rational recovery, where you see your thoughts as they're not you.
They don't define you. Your thoughts don't define you. They're just thoughts, and you have control over your thoughts.
You don't have control of your thoughts. It's just your thoughts just come up as they come up.
And then let them go.
And it's what your brain does. Yeah. I mean, you don't have to listen to them.
Right.
You don't have
Not
to obey
defined
them.
or controlled. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So now instead of I had very negative thinking patterns. That's how I grew up and that's how I was surviving life, and I was trying to survive all this negativity that I was bringing onto myself. And it was only through finding presence and that inner peace, having access to that, then I had awareness. So I was in this space of peace. So when a negative thought came in, it was that much more noticeable. And instead of being like, oh, all the anxiety and the whole pattern that would follow, I could be, okay, this is an interesting thought. Where is this coming from? Why am I thinking this? These thoughts just become, as Eckhart says, there are clouds in the sky and you realize that you are the blue sky. And so you're not the cloud, you're the blue sky. So when a cloud comes, it can also pass. And you just let them flow through you and you become this channel. And yeah, sometimes you'll get hooked into a thought and you'll become it and you'll act it out, but you have a choice.
Is that part of the beginning of your self-love journey?
Yes.
Because you were able to sort of move out of your depression because of reading this book again, self-therapy with books, which is great. Yeah.
Books. I mean, books are the best things in the world.
Yeah, that's really, really great.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely. Now I knew I could be happy. I was like, okay, I want to be happy and I'm going to make a plan. Sorry, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say, where was this in the binge eating? What chronologically?
It's actually, okay.
Was it before or after or during?
Trying to think. It's actually during, I think.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Actually, wait. I was in the same place. I was in the same house when I read both books. So it must have been
in the same time. Okay. Sorry, I interrupted.
I'm just flashing back to that bedroom that I would spend so much time in. Yeah, it was the same time.
So the self-love.
I think Eckhart Tolle came after I'd stopped binge eating.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because I started finding freedom in that. But they strengthened each other. The two practices were complementing each other and I started to learn a new way of living. And then it was like, okay, I know I can be happy, so I'm going to make sure that I am happy. So I was sitting in an airport with my sister and I was like, I remember it felt like Christmas, when someone says, you can have anything you want. What do you want? And I was really young, I was in my 20s. It was like my whole life was ahead of me, but I hadn't really considered I can choose what I want to be happy. I know it sounds so obvious now, but back then it just didn't occur to me that I could choose how I wanted to live my life and actually choose things that make me happy instead of what I had to do, So I was making a list and she's like, Mel, what makes you happy? And I'm like, oh my God, I love Chinese culture. I love Chinese language. I love this. I love that. I love travel. And I wrote them all down. And then I made a promise to myself and I said, I'm going to make these things happen for myself. So I moved to China.
Great.
Yeah. And I was so happy, so alive. A new place to explore, of course. Traveling is such a great way to get that high because you're out of your usual thinking patterns and you can explore something new. And yeah, I've lived by that ever since. I'm going to honor myself in a way that I promise to be happy. And it's it was learning to take responsibility for my happiness as well. So it was I can't get angry at someone because they didn't do something that makes me happy or, didn't treat me in a certain way that makes me happy or makes me feel loved. It's my responsibility to find that happiness myself. And with relating to people, I have a choice. I can tell them if something doesn't work. I'm not a victim to life.
Yeah.
I can actually choose a job that I love, and it's been a really long journey. When I came to Hong Kong 3 years ago, that's when I did the major work. Now I was aware of my thoughts. I could see these negative patterns and they were still coming up. And I'm like, how do I stop these patterns? I keep sabotaging myself and I don't want to anymore, but I can't help it still. So I did a lot of work here in Hong Kong. I did hypnotherapy. I read lots of books. There's a beautiful book called The Self-Love Affair by Katie Phillips. It has actually practical exercises in it. I did a personal development course called Landmark, which is really transformational. I did a lot of discussion groups, everything that I could get my hands on, I did. And it worked.
Oh, that's brilliant.
It's amazing because with self-love, it's it's like I had to stand there in front of the mirror and all these self-loathing thoughts would come up straight away about how I looked and even about how I was. I hated how controlling I was. I hated how bossy I was. I hated how sad and lonely and depressed I was. I just hated everything about myself. And I didn't know how to love myself. And it was like, okay, first step, be willing to love myself. Am I willing to like love myself as I am? And that was really hard because most of the time when parents want to like stop their kids doing a bad habit, what do? They get angry or they punish them or they tell them why it's bad and the terrible consequences that will follow. So I did all that to myself to stop all these bad habits. But of course it didn't work because it's like it's coming from an energy of fear, and that fear and that punishment and like, you know, trying to stop something by saying that it's a bad thing to do and it's wrong. It's like it's stopping, it's constricting energy. And it doesn't work because like fear is self-fulfilling. I don't want to be controlling. I end up being more controlling. It just didn't work. And then by doing all this personal development work that I did, I learned that love is the most powerful thing in the world. It's the only thing that leads to change. And I couldn't have changed anything about my life if I didn't love myself first. Because like, you know, how fear is it's constrictive, but love is very transformational. Again, going back to the kind of parents and kids version, because I feel like sometimes I'm parenting myself.
Yeah. Hey, that thought popped into my head. I was thinking, oh, she's parenting herself. Totally. Yeah.
It's almost like I had to give myself a safe space. And, you know, I just have this vision of me as a little toddler and like, you know, clearing out a safe playground where there's nothing to fall over, nothing to hurt myself on. And then how free I can be in that space and how I can run around and like completely be myself and completely be self-expressed and try new things, be adventurous and be everything I wanted to be because I knew I was safe.
These are all things you didn't really have as a child as well. That kind of freedom to be yourself and to be free.
I definitely did at home, but not at boarding school.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and because I was boarding school since 6, the majority of my life, I would spend 9 months of the year at boarding school and only 3 months at home. So it was what I knew more than I did.
Sure.
But yeah, so like having that safe space internally, I've actually been able to relax and be myself and love myself. And after I started doing that, after I actually let myself love myself, however terrible it sounded, you know, I had to get these blockages of, oh no, it's bad and it's very proud and it's very egotistical and arrogant to love yourself and all this kind of stuff, especially growing up as a Christian.
Yeah.
You're never supposed to say good things about yourself as a Christian.
Yeah, sure.
So I had to get past all of those blocks, and that's what the personal development stuff did. And then I was actually, okay, I'm going to allow myself to love myself because I think this is the only way forward. And when I did that, everything changed.
What impact has that had on your life?
What changed was, well, physically, I lost 3 sizes, dress sizes. I got my dream job. I have started dating, which I was far too afraid to do. And of course, self-loathing person would never go on a date. And yeah, like I'm so happy. Like I designed my life around what makes me feel alive. And even if it's challenging and what makes me feel happy, like I've got these friendships that I never thought possible. They're just like these friends that I love so much. And I know that they're going to be lifelong. You know, they're not going to just be there on the surface. They're such deep and beautiful friendships that I'm really grateful for. And I healed the relationship with my family. I'm closer to them now than I ever was.
Oh, that's so lovely.
Yeah. And yeah, none of that would have been possible if I didn't love myself. I mean, self-love for me is a prerequisite to happiness, and it's a prerequisite to success as well, because, you know, well, success that you enjoy. Because, you know, I wouldn't have allowed myself to apply for a job like the one I have now, which is doing what I love and getting paid for it. I mean, that's pretty lucky and amazing.
Yeah, I think if you
allowed.
don't feel good about yourself or have low self-esteem or you don't have self-love, then you're not going to take those risks or put yourself out there because you don't feel worthy.
No, you don't feel worthy, and you don't let yourself have any ounce of joy because you're like, I want to change so badly. You know, I'm not going to give myself a reward until I actually change. So it's like the punishment mentality. And then you never change and you never get your rewards. And
so
then
you just keep punishing yourself and that's just a negativity spiral, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's really different.
Oh my gosh, that's really such an amazing story that you've really evolved into, and congratulations for getting so far at 32 when you're not 22.
It's still ongoing. I mean, it never ends.
Well, that's the thing. I think it's lifelong learning. We can always grow. We can always change. We can always take risks. It doesn't stop at a certain age. It certainly doesn't. I'm still doing it in my 50s.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's so true.
And even though I say I love myself now, there's still, every now and then I'll find something that I really don't like about myself and I hate myself.
And we all have days like that too.
Yeah.
And it's linked to hormones as well.
Yeah. But it's actually an interesting thing that's just come up into my head now. It's actually learning what love is, because I assumed before I kind of crossed love with approval. So only when I could approve of myself could I love myself. And obviously that didn't happen. But now it's like learning how to love myself when I don't approve of myself, how to love myself when I'm wrong, how to love myself when I hurt someone else and regretting what I did, how to love myself when, I don't get it right and I let people down and I don't fulfill a promise, that kind of stuff. That's what I'm getting into even deeper now.
And they're big challenges, aren't they?
Yeah. I mean, again, these books that make such a great difference. So there was one book that another genuine pearl of wisdom is a book I read. What's it called? The 5 Things I Cannot Change. I think it's by David Bochi or somebody. But in it, he describes this process, calls it the 5 A's. The first A is attention, then allowing, then accepting, then affection, and then appreciation. So whenever something comes up, these horrible things that I do and whatever negative thing comes up, I can see it. So like if I get angry at someone or whatever, then if I can catch it, then I'll have that attention. Okay. So why am I angry? And then, and then allowing. Okay. I'm allowing myself to be angry. This is what's happening now. It's the present moment. It's not like I can't just wish I'm not angry. I am angry. So I'm going to allow myself to be angry. And then it's, acceptance. Yeah. Accepting that I'm angry. And then it's like affection. So anger is just a normal human emotion. I don't have to beat myself up for it. Let's find out what's happening behind the anger, why I'm so angry. And then usually it comes from a good commitment. Like, I'm angry at being treated badly because I'm standing up for myself and I'm a stand that people treat each other well. So it's coming from a good place. And then that's affection and appreciation. I actually appreciate where this anger is coming from. So instead of punishing myself about stuff, I go through this 5 A's process when I remember to, and it really helps to transform like the negative energy into a real positive energy and allowing. And
that's such a great concept. It's a really simple, helpful concept, isn't it? To change the way that you are reacting and responding.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. That's really good.
No, I want to share it with everyone.
Yeah. If you could go back and talk to your younger self, the girl who had an eating disorder, what would you say to her?
I think I would say, I know it's an indirect thing, but I think I would tell her that people are the most important thing in life and relationships are what make us happy as human beings. For some strange reason, I didn't know that when I was young.
No, a lot of people don't.
No, and I think because I had this cycle of boarding school where I was on my own and then I was very clingy with my parents. And I grew up as a very clingy person. And then I didn't like that about myself anymore. So, when I left for England, I was like, I'm not going to be clingy. I'm going to be the opposite of clingy. I'm going to be so independent. People are going to be admiring me for my independence. So I'm not going to need anyone for anything.
Right, so you went from one extreme to another.
Totally.
And
trying
isolated
to fix myself.
yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. Isolation was what I've known my whole life. I was so determined to prove myself as an independent person that relationships came second. And, I don't have any friendships from primary school or secondary school because I cut them off when I left school. I'm like, I don't need you guys anymore. Go. And that's really sad because I look around my friends in Hong Kong, they have best friends since, primary school. I'm like, I wish I had that. The lesson I've learned now is that people are the most important thing. And it's learning to actually be in a real relationship with someone, to actually be myself, loving myself. And let the other person be themselves, loving themselves. And it's the sweetest it's like just the best thing about.
Best formula for a great relationship.
Yeah. And it's the best part of being human and being alive. I mean, I don't want to be on this earth if I don't have people, if I don't have the people I love. And if I don't learn to love and I don't learn what love is. I mean, I spent a lot of years, I'm not going to use the word wasted because it's not wasted. I spent a lot of my years through binging and even after that, even in China, it was all about achievement. Like, so if I'm trying to prove that I'm independent, I wanted to achieve stuff. So I thought I'd be happy if I'm successful, and then other people would be approving of me, right? Because that's how I get love. So I would try and achieve stuff and travel and do stuff I've never done. And that was all really great. And I really enjoyed it and I really loved it. But it obviously wasn't fulfilling in a way that a relationship is fulfilling.
Oh my gosh, this is resonating with me so much because I think that's what I do. I teach, I podcast, I write, I do all these things to fill this hole because I'm alone and I don't have a partner and I haven't for years and years and years. And I guess that it's a way of getting approval or love as well, you know, having people recognize my achievements. And I feel proud of that and it's great, but it still doesn't resolve that issue, if that makes sense. So this is really resonating with me. It's making me think, hang on a minute. You need to do some work on yourself.
No, I think we all do. And I hear you. I've totally, and I'm still like in that space as well. I mean, I don't have a partner or a significant other. And that's always a challenge for me. It's like this loneliness just keeps coming back. And it's like, okay, how can I take responsibility for it? How can I enrich the relationships I do have with my friends and my family? And how can I be that person who makes the first move and sends the first text and be the person who calls? Because I know that's what makes me happy. If I call my parents and have a chat with them, I'm going to be, you know, that's what makes me happy. And because I'm a stand to be happy, it's my responsibility to call them. It's not their responsibility to call me, you know.
That's so true. That's so interesting that you say that. I called my mum yesterday and had an hour chat for the first time in ages.
Really?
Yeah. So that's interesting that you say that. And you've triggered a thought in me is that I suffer from FOMO. I have this real fear of missing out or being left out, and I take it incredibly personally, and I feel like I failed or I'm not as good as I should be or I've let somebody down or I've said something to upset somebody, and I ruminate on it. And I'm getting better at not doing that now, but I'm not over it.
No.
You know, I'm not over it. And I do feel that that's linked to me being single for so many years and not having that partner that I can fall back on. So I'm looking for all the social opportunities I can to connect with people.
Yeah.
So,
totally.
So that's really interesting. And I wish that I could overcome that completely.
It's an ongoing thing. And I think it's like a healing process that maybe will never end, because if we look at it as our inner child, that's how I see it. It's always, you know, so many times I'm behaving out of the little girl who misses her mom, or the little girl who feels sad that her best friend, you know, is friends with someone else, you know, that kind of stuff. It's like, it's the inner child that needs to heal. And there's really great therapies, especially hypnotherapy, that's really good for that, which I do on a regular basis. And it's like these kind of behaviors still come up and it's still okay. Like that's the thing I'm learning. Like even if I haven't completely changed the behavior or if I haven't become whatever I'm on my way to be, it's like I give myself some slack. It's okay to just develop in the way that you're developing and let the healing process take as long as it takes.
As we said before, life is a lifelong learning lesson. It really is.
It is.
Well, Mel, thank you so much for coming to talk to me today. This has been so enlightening and fascinating. And I think my listeners are really, really going to absolutely love it. It's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much.
I really want to thank you, Jules, because you let me come and share my story when I'm not like a therapist or like I've never written a book or I'm not a famous person. So I'm really grateful for this opportunity.
But you know what? There's so much that people can learn just from listening to other people's stories. It can really resonate with them and you can learn so much about yourself. I'm not a therapist either, by the way, everyone.
And that's why I love what you do. So thank you for doing what you do.
Thank you so much. So if there's anybody out there who you feel would benefit from listening to this podcast or you think they'd be interested in this topic, please can you share it with them? And if you could take the time to rate and review this podcast on iTunes, that would be amazing. Please subscribe to Hong Kong Confidential. And thank you so much for listening. There are so many different topics with amazing people, just like Mel. And just remember, as Brené Brown says, owning your story and loving ourselves through the process is the bravest thing we will ever do. Thank you so much, Mel.
I love that.
Thanks, Mel.
Thanks, Jules.
Bye.
Bye.
Hi, Confidants. I want to tell you about my Patreon page. I've joined Patreon in the hope of getting sponsorship for my Hong Kong Confidential podcast. Patreon is a great way for my listeners to get on board and sponsor me with monthly payments, and that goes towards my production costs and rewards for my members. If you're interested in checking out my Patreon page, please go to patreon.com and search up Jules Hannaford or Hong Kong Confidential. I would really appreciate you visiting my page. So that brings us to the end of another Hong Kong Confidential podcast. I'm Jules Hannaford. Thanks for joining me, and I hope you'll be with me again next week. If you enjoyed today's podcast, please can you go to iTunes to rate and review it? I would really appreciate your feedback. You can email me at jules@hongkongconfidential.net, and you can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Hong Kong Confidential. If you'd like to hit me up on Twitter, it's at Jules Hannaford. I would love to hear from you.
Hi, Jeremy Cordeaux in the Court of Public Opinion. I'm just on air here to let you know that we'll be live streaming the Court of Public Opinion every Friday between 9 o'clock and 12 on jeremycordeaux.com. Please join us. We'd love to have you.